Hello, everybody. Hi, Parker.
Hey Ashley, how's it going?
Doing great. It's going great. It's kind of getting cold over here in Atlanta.
Wait a
How's
second. I see somebody, I'm sorry to interrupt. Wait, I see somebody next to you, an actual real person. Surely this could not be one of our guests that's a living person in a room next to you. Wait, who is this, Ashley? Who's sitting right next to you?
Can you believe it? We do have a real person here today.
I
This
know.
is Kelly Prang. We're gonna do a more. So I'm gonna let her introduce herself in a little while, but she is our guest speaker, and she lives right down the road from where we're presenting today. So we thought it'd be really fun to get together and be here together, as opposed to in all separate locations.
I know, Kelly. So that's a little bit of a inside joke. So I think Ashley and I are going on almost 2 years of doing these webinars, and I think there was one time where Ashley
One
and I were in the
time.
same room, and now this is the first time that we've had the actual guest in a physical space with us. So welcome, and I know you'll introduce yourself in a second, but that was a an inside joke. But today's webinar is all about unlocking home value, the renovation advantage. And it actually is cold, Ashley, in Texas. And it is cold in
Believe it.
Georgia too.
Yeah, it's a little chilly outside.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get going. As we said, welcome, welcome. We've got three logos at the top here. We've got DreamSmith Realty, Keller Williams Luxury, and Renovation Sells. And you'll learn all about Renovation Sells, Kelly's company, here in just a minute. But first, Ashley, for those who are joining us for the first webinar of the new year, would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm Ashley Smith, and I am a luxury real estate agent in the Atlanta area. I focus on Lake Lanier, and I kind of really view my job as being a dream maker more than a realtor. Um, Although, of course, I'm doing that. I love helping people identify where they want to go with their lives and how real estate plays into that, whether that's downsizing, upsizing, or thinking about getting a second or third home. I love traveling. That's my dad in that picture in the top left-hand corner, and he also helps me a lot with real estate and is on my team as well. C.L. Smith.
And hi, I'm Parker Couch. I'm a mortgage loan originator with Barrett Financial, former teacher, principal. It's all Ashley and I know each other. I promise loans will always close on time and that we'll have proactive over communication because that's what you deserve. And every once in a while, you'll actually be able to hear that proactive over communication. So that's our goal for the rest of this webinar. If you have any questions as we're going through, please don't hesitate to write those questions in the questions box. We always end all of our webinars with questions that we get from our participants and viewers. Well, as we said at the beginning, this is all about unlocking home value, the renovation advantage. And this is not possible without our amazing guest, Kelly. Kelly, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for that introduction. So, Kelly Prang, I own Renovation Cells here in Atlanta, renovation company that helps homeowners make quick renovations to their houses. I've been really in this market, real estate geek and nerd and design nerd for about 23 years now. So, definitely have passion for what I do. Gets me up every morning, and I just love working with people and all the little intricate neighborhoods within Atlanta. And a couple fun facts for me there on the screen. Also love to travel. Big fan of caffeine as well. And I've lived in Atlanta all my adult life, most of my life period. So I'm excited to be here this morning too.
Excited to have you. Quick question. What cup of coffee are we on so far today? It's high noon. How many cups are we in?
So one, and I love caffeine, but caffeine does not love me. So I'm a really big fan of the half calf, and I figure I could have two
Okay.
for one.
Yep, yep. That's great. Okay, so we are two half caps in, and it's only high noon. Maybe we can finish with a whole cup of
There's
coffee by
one.
the end of
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah.
workday. Awesome. All right. So Kelly, really, you're going to be driving today's presentation. Really excited for the folks watching this to learn all about you, learn about your company, and also the power of a renovation. But yeah, talk us through your mission and then kind of your sequential steps when somebody is looking into using you and your company for renovation.
Yeah, so thanks. I think when people hear the word renovation or remodel, I mean, there's a real feel of anxiety. It's not a fun thought. It's fun to think about the after product, right? But then you start thinking about contractors in your house and how you find the right team, how you trust the people. Do you know they're insured? What kind of quality of work do they do? How long is my house going to be dusty and in a mess? it's quite overwhelming. And so I like to think of myself as really more of a project manager that comes in, takes care of all of that, um, eases the nerves of the homeowner, so that it is a pleasant experience. It's quick in and out. It's within a reasonable budget, not to go over budget. So I'm the person where the buck stops with me, right? I mean, if
Right,
something goes
right.
a little bit sideways, my clients typically don't even know that it went sideways, and I've swooped in and made that correction. So I like to come in and, do the soft renovation, where there's a lot of heavy stuff going on, but it's very comfortable and it's pleasant right at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the idiom is anything that looks easy is a lot like a duck, calm on the top of the water, but paddling like crazy underneath. So it seems like you're embodying that for sure. All right, so our overview for today is we're going to share numbers. And I know for those of you who've endured some of the early number presentations that Ashley and I did, where I talked a lot about, flex yields and flex terms and treasury yield spreads and all of that. Don't worry, these numbers are going to be a lot simpler and also, I think, a lot more interesting. But also, we're going to answer the question, should I remodel? Is this something that I want to do for a house I already own or a house that I want to buy? We'll talk about the process for remodeling, the before and after, and then, of course, the last thing is, all right, I'm in, I want to do this. How in the world am I going to be able to afford a renovation for my house or a house that I'm purchasing? But first, let's talk about why should you even remodel? Kelly, why should we remodel, especially if you're living in Atlanta?
Yeah, so there's a number of reasons, and we'll talk about a lot of different scenarios over the next several minutes. But there's a real mismatch between what buyers want to purchase in a new home and what's actually out there in inventory. And we all know about the inventory shortage, which is not going to clear up anytime soon, definitely not this calendar year or the next calendar year. So there's a mismatch between what people want to buy and what they can find. And so if you look at the picture on the screen, the picture on the left is the pre-renovation kitchen, and the kitchen on the right is the post-renovation. Exact same space, exact same cabinets, appliances are the same. In the kitchen on the left, there's nothing wrong with that kitchen. I mean, it's a nice kitchen, but people walk into a house, a prospective buyer walks into a house, and they purchase a house based off of a feeling. And
Hmm,
sometimes they can't even verbalize that feeling, right? Like the kitchen on the left is good, but the kitchen on the right emits a different type of emotion. And so they might
yeah.
not realize that the difference between those two, because one's not bad and one's not good necessarily, they're both good, but the one on the right just has a different feel and look that buyers today are looking for.
The one on it's interesting. The one on the left is gorgeous and ornate, but it almost looks like a kitchen that belongs in a catalog, aka one that you would never want to actually cook in. Like it's something, it looks almost too ornate. And the one on the right looks beautiful. It's simple, but it looks homey. It looks inviting. It looks like a place I'd actually would want to, cook. And who wants to own a house with a kitchen where you don't actually want to cook in it? So yeah, I think that's a great point. Ashley, before we go to the next slide, is this something that you are experiencing with your clients? That there's a mismatch between existing home inventory and what they actually want.
Definitely. I mean, it's not usually this much of a, beautiful kitchen. I want a more homey kitchen kind of feel, but there definitely is like, I would rather go to my full budget in my price point to be able to buy a home that already looks and feels the way I want it to versus, this one's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people just right now don't have the capacity or the willingness to do that work when it's, again, really not that hard. So that's why I'm really glad we have Kelly here, because she'll be able to share with us why we don't want people to like step away from what could be their dream house just because one or two
Right.
rooms are not the way they want them to be.
And from my perspective, Kelly, oftentimes I will see folks experience this issue that you're addressing and that we're talking about. And oftentimes they refuse to sacrifice what they want for a home. And so instead they'll sacrifice their ideal location. And there's a cliche, location, location, location. And so I do think that if you have an open mind to the idea of renovating and prioritizing a location, well, when you're open to renovation, whether it's a house that you currently live in or house you want to buy, you can prioritize location, 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 because you can make the house that isn't perfect, perfect for you in the perfect location that you know you want to live in. But yeah, let's actually talk about numbers for a second. So we've got three different kind of spec properties. Kelly, talk us through these.
Yeah, so these are actual projects that we've worked on. And the spirit is these people wanted to sell. They knew their house was not as beautiful as it could be. It's not as updated to attract the most buyers. And what I do when I work with home sellers is try to neutralize their property. So if I
Mm,
see, especially in the second and third pictures here, examples, they have the dark cabinets. Buyers today want light, bright kitchens. So we went in and we, updated that with not new cabinetry, but just paint, right? Just
yeah.
really simple, quick, affordable, lower budget. And it's all in the spirit of putting a little bit of money into your house, selling faster and getting that money back, plus, multiples of that on top. And so you look at some of the numbers, and I won't run through each one of these in detail because I'll do some of that later. But investing a little bit can yield quite a bit on the back end in terms of profit.
Yeah.
And the thing that is difficult to measure is how fast your house sells, right? I mean,
Right.
you can
Right.
easily quantify the additional money you made off of your initial investment, but if it sells in, 4 days versus 4 months, I mean, that's a real financial statement too.
That's a great point. Ashley, thinking about, if you have a listing and it's been on the market for a really, really long time, even if you get an offer, and even if the offer comes in before you've decreased that list price, oftentimes the buyer's agent and the buyers will look and see how long the house was on the market. And there's this weird, unquantifiable psychological edge and issue that happens where, well, it's been on the market for 120 days. We're going to go ahead and lowball. We're going to play really hard to get because we now have the advantage. So that's a really, really good point, Kelly.
Yeah, so Parker, it's interesting you say that
Sure.
because I've been called multiple times by realtors that have houses that are sitting on the market and they're not selling,
Mm,
and the realtor knows why they're not selling. It's because of that really awful kitchen or the master bath, or every room is painted a really bright color of yellow and orange. And the homeowner says, well, I mean, aren't people going to renovate after they move in anyway? And they're going to paint it the color that they want to. And the realtor says, well, it's possible. And they just can't convince them that if you could neutralize, get rid of the orange and yellow
yeah.
paint, that your house will sell faster because it is in that great school district. It's the right location. It's at the right price point that people can't visualize orange walls. So a lot of times the homeowner pulls the property and then they say, okay, well, maybe I will do those renovations. They'll renovate and then relist. And it's amazing. Sometimes we get more than the original list price.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
with
that's awesome. That's a great point. Um, so when we're talking about, and know that and if you're watching this and you're like, wait, I actually kind of want to renovate the house that I'm living in. Why do we keep talking about neutralizing to sell? Don't worry, your time is coming. I promise we're going to be covering a lot in this presentation. But I do love the idea of neutralizing because oftentimes, if you're thinking about what makes a house really desirable, there's something that I studied in school. I was a film and English major, and now I'm doing numbers. But it's this idea of what makes a movie star. And there was a study done saying, how can we quantify or figure out or crack the code of what makes a movie star? Is it their acting ability, so on and so forth? And what they found is and I think Harrison Ford's a good example. If you have somebody who's too attractive, they feel unapproachable. If you have somebody who has a really unique face or features, then they're usually like a character actor, they're not a movie star. And so what they found is that a movie star is somebody who the audience can project their face onto and actually picture themselves in the story. And the term that was used in that study is neutralize, right? Is how do you find somebody, a movie star has the ability of neutralizing their appearance so that the viewer can project themselves into the story. And it seems like that's kind of the same concept, right? Is how do we neutralize important spaces in a house so when somebody comes in, a potential buyer, they can instantly picture themselves in that space, whether it's keeping the space as it is or they can picture whatever changes that they want to make. So it's a really, really interesting concept that I wanted to point out. Now, when we talk about the smarter way to sell, I thought this was an interesting little tidbit. Nearly half of all millennials said they would max out their budget to avoid renovations. Kelly, so are you really seeing this? And Ashley, are you really seeing this?
I think so. I mean, these people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they're very busy working, they're very busy having families or traveling, and they don't want to spend their time or their money on doing this work when they can spend their time elsewhere in
Hmm.
enjoying their life and their lifestyle.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Parker, it goes against everything that I'm made out of, I mean, because I'm not a millennial, I'm a Gen Xer, and
Uh-huh.
I've been investing in real estate for 23, 24 years now, and I want to buy the really ugly house because I see the potential and the
Right.
possible upside financially. But today's buyers really don't. I mean, they want a house that is neutral, that they can visualize their face in, like your
Yeah.
analogy. I love that. So it's what the market has pivoted to.
Interesting. All right. So for sellers, obviously, we want to be able to unlock more equity, be able to sell our house at a higher dollar. So talk us through this slide, Kelly.
Yeah, so when you have that neutral surface, the millennial purchasing that, because statistically speaking, it's probably going to be a millennial that purchased. They're making most buying purchases today.
Mhm.
They may come in and change this, change the facade of the fireplace, but when it's neutral, they're more attracted to that. So naturally, if you neutralize your house, you're going to get more offers, more potential buyers. It's more attractive. Typically, the price point goes up. That's where we
Mm.
see over offer or over, offer price. Because I think it's a tale of two worlds right now in real estate because there's such a shortage of inventory and you have a lot of houses that are expired listings. They sit there and they never sell. And they're kind of the ugly duckling, the little Christmas tree with like four twigs. And then you have the beautiful homes that you can come in and picture your face on. Those are the ones getting multiple offers. So I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, Ashley, but it's really a tale of two cities. Houses that go really fast that fly off the market, and then ones that sit there and expire. So, and it's the ones that are neutralized that have those updates that tend to fly off the market with multiple offers.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I found that to be true, and it's really interesting too in my market. I would say about half of my sellers are literally have these luxury, very unique homes that nobody else has a home like. So first of all, we got a unique home to sell, but secondly, they're not always in a hurry to sell. So they don't mind if it's going to take a little bit longer to not do the work, but at the same time, we never want that house to just be sitting there,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so at some point we do end up having conversations with the sellers. Well, usually at the beginning, and they're like, no, I don't want to do anything to the house, and I don't have to. And they're right. But then at some point coming back and saying, let's look at what a few small changes to your home could do to really make it more attractive to even more buyers.
That's awesome. So here's the crux of the matter is, should I remodel? And the kind of the structure of this webinar today is this idea of first renovating your existing home, whether that is to sell now or later, that's what we've been talking about, or renovating your existing home to stay. And then we're going to then end with renovating a new home. So Kelly, like you were talking about, you've been investing in real estate for 23 years. You may want to expand your horizons when looking for your new home to move into by trying to figure out, and maybe it takes having a partner like you, Kelly, to really look past the orange wall and not have to buy a neutralized space because you might be able to get an incredible value. So, but first, let's continue on talking about renovating to sell.
Yeah, so this is historically what my market has been. I've worked with realtors and home sellers to get their houses ready to sell. And the other things that you talked about on the last slide are really a little bit newer to me. It was a little bit of my business, and now it's a significant portion of it. So this is where my company was founded on, renovating to sell. So there's an actual project that we did. It was a townhouse. It wasn't in terrible condition, but it wasn't terribly pretty either. And so
Mm.
the realtor had suggested that we listed at 150. The homeowner was appalled. They tested the market, didn't sell. So they said, okay, what would I need to do to get more activity on my house? So they suggested we do a full kitchen reno. We did flooring throughout, new light fixtures throughout the entire townhouse. So they invested about $64,000 and they ended up selling it for 357. So you
Wow.
talk about, profit, invest 64 and you make an additional 143 and your
Wow.
sales price is way up there. It really makes sense. And it was a couple of weeks worth of work. And if you look at that before and after, we didn't do anything crazy in there. We did do new flooring throughout the townhouse, new light fixtures, new countertops. And those cabinets are the same cabinets that they started with.
Oh, wow.
Paint is my best friend. It's where I get the most return on investment.
Right.
It's relatively inexpensive. And if you can paint cabinets rather than reface them or replace them, that's always going to be my first option to do. And a lot of people say, oh my gosh, how could you paint wood cabinets? And honestly, if I had that conversation with my husband at home, it might be a difficult one because he loves natural wood, but buyers
Uh-huh.
don't want to see the dark wood anymore, especially if it's an orangey wood like you see in that picture.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody can't paint cabinets, right? I mean, you've probably seen some bad cabinet painting
Yes.
jobs out there, but the right technique and the right cabinet painter can make them look like they have a factory finish, like they came out of the factory of that color rather than the original wood. So it's all cosmetic things, really simple things that are non-threatening, very quick. I won't say $64,000 is a low amount of money, but in relation to the return off of that, I think it was a good investment.
And we'll talk about financing options. So 64,000 might sound like a lot, and it is a lot, but it's a lot easier to actually finance a project at this scope than you may think. So stick around to the end for that. All right, let's talk about this one right here. We see another really hefty profit.
Yeah, so we were looking at listing at 625. The homeowner, it was at the bottom of the neighborhood. It was a suburban neighborhood. They put about $60,000 into renovation cost. We did flooring throughout. You see the kitchen had a nice refresh. We kept the cabinets, painted them, tore down the wallpaper, changed light fixtures. We kept all of the appliances, new countertops, painted the entire house, and also did a refresh in the bathroom. So they spent about $60,000. We ended up listing it at 800. And this is one where we actually got over the list price.
Wow,
It sold
amazing.
for 830 in about 3 weeks. So their profit after the $60,000 investment was 145,000.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm also noticing in this one, as well as the previous example, never underestimate the power of some well-placed hardware. It's amazing how just having the little dots of contrasting black against the bright white, it just makes a world of difference. It's really, really smart. Okay, we've got another really, really hefty profit of 128. And I'm Kelly, I'm a little bit like your husband. I actually really love the dark wood. So,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely incredible looking at the before and after in this kitchen. So talk us through this one.
Yeah, so it's very similar to the last couple. And I think what I'd like to highlight is we're not doing anything structural. You'll see that the appliances are in the same position. We're not changing, the layout of the cabinetry. The kitchen has the exact same flow. It's all cosmetic. So we're not pulling any permits. We're not doing anything that would be structural where we're moving walls. It really is just coming in, changing the surfaces, all cosmetic. But about a $47,000 investment yielded $128,000 in profit. And because it is all cosmetic, it's pretty quick in and out. It's all
Yeah.
about the design. I have a full-time designer that walks through the process with great design boards. And so we can get in and out pretty quickly and keep the same format.
You said
Yeah,
something.
that's
Go, Ashley. No, you go, then I'll go.
okay. That's really key. Actually, something that I'm impressed with what Kelly does is she can come in, see the house. She sends the design board in like a day or two. And then it's like, whoa, I can do this with my house, kind of shows you what it would look like. And then once the homeowner is ready to do this, it usually takes 2 weeks, maybe 3 if it's a bigger project. So as long as the homeowner is willing to get out of the way, or maybe go on vacation, that helps. Go stay with a friend for a couple of weeks, then they can get everything done really quickly, and then the house is ready to sell.
Yeah, I mean, the thing
So
to keep in mind is people are not wanting to delist their house or postpone listing their house for 3 months in order to do these renovations. The key is getting in and out pretty quickly so you can keep the process moving and get the house sold.
that's a great point. And something else that I wanted to point out is most folks, not all, but most folks who are trying to sell their home, they still have a mortgage that they're making payments on. And so if you have a renovation that only takes 2 weeks to complete versus 8 weeks to complete, that could be the difference of you saving two mortgage payments before being able to pay off that mortgage and get your next house. So that is really key. Okay, so as kind of a summary, unlocking more equity means you have more money too. And these seem obvious, but I mean, I cannot tell you, especially when we were at the height of our market. Ashley, you and I were working together when we had the COVID crazy and everybody was liquidating retirement accounts and robbing their grandmothers to try to find the money to buy homes. Is okay, so you buy the house, But if you're not maximizing your return on investment, not maximizing the money that you're keeping or putting into your pocket, I mean, just think about how much these things impact your daily life. The ability or the inability to furnish a new home, pay off loans, purchase a bigger home, having a larger down payment, renovating your new home, taking a much needed post move vacation. These are huge things that you're going to feel in your life. Um, I would curious, Kelly and or Ashley, have you seen this with the clients that you've worked at where folks maybe over leverage themselves, don't take the advice that you have? And then when they actually do get into the house, they realize that they're not getting some of the things that we see on the slide.
Yeah, I think that, you get really excited when you're house shopping, right? And
Yeah,
then, people tend to overspend, and people even tend to do that with me on renovations. Because I'll come in and I'll recommend the bare minimum I think they should spend in order to maximize the sales price, right? And
right.
then once you get into the whole process of renovating, and I'm renovating maybe a kitchen and the master bathroom, then they start saying, well, what about the bathroom in the basement? Or what about this and what about that? And at some point, you have to stop to where it makes really good sense to put money in, but past that point, you're not going to get a return off of it. So sometimes you have to rein people back in because they get really excited with the process. But I'll tell you what's really fun for me. It's when I renovate for a seller and a seller has to move. They want to move to a different school district or maybe closer to a job. And so they're selling their house today, but they're also looking for another house. If I can maximize what they're getting for the house they're selling, all of a sudden they're open to maybe a house that's not quite perfect that they're going to move into because they know they can do a really quick 2-week kitchen refresh.
Hmm. Okay, that's a great
So
point.
true.
Ashley, I'm thinking of some clients that you and I have worked in the past where you've had to have a come to Jesus conversation with them about, remember, we are selling this house and not living in it. So we probably should pump the brakes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's so true. And I mean, they do get excited about renovating their
Yeah.
home, making it look beautiful. And the problem is, at some point, right? You've hit your $20,000 that you just put into your house to make it look. That's going to maximize your investment. Let's put another 20,000 in because these rooms could look great too. And they love it for the couple of weeks they still own the house, but then they realize we could have used that money to buy a boat or uh,
Yeah.
buy our new furniture that doesn't fit in our new house because it's a different home. So
Yep. That makes sense. So this is just a summary slide of the previous slide saying, imagine the possibilities if you had an extra $100,000. Well, you can imagine all you want. And I'm telling you right now, you can do a lot more than what you're even thinking in your brain right now with $100,000, especially in the world of real estate. So let's go to our next big section, which is all about renovating to stay. So we have this idea of like your move-in client, home whole refresh, and happy clients. What do these three check marks mean to you and your business, Kelly?
Yeah, so this is an actual real life scenario where I did renovation for a home seller, and they were out there looking, having a hard time finding a house that they really fell in love with, in the new area they wanted to move to. And so they kind of kept in the back of their mind that, you know what, maybe we could buy something we're not, completely happy with. And so we went in and did a kitchen refresh, in just a couple of weeks in the new home before they even moved in it. They did take a 2-week VRBO vacation in between the two houses. And then by the time they had the moving truck pull up, they had this beautiful kitchen. They
Wow.
loved, 95% of the house. They just could not get past the kitchen. So I think it's fun, when you can have a client move into a house and you hate for someone to purchase a house that they're not fully excited about. But
Yeah, yeah.
when you could, yeah, when you could, have them move into a house that they're really happy with. And I'll tell you another scenario where we're renovating to stay, not necessarily renovating to move, are people say, I'm sitting on a 3% mortgage. I really want to move. We need a bigger house, a smaller house, whatever it might be. It's really hard for me to get rid of this 3% mortgage.
Hmm.
I'm not comfortable, purchasing a 7 or 7.5% mortgage. Let me wait until rates come down. I know when I'm ready to sell my house, I'll probably need to do some updates. Let me go ahead and take care of those now so that when we're ready to pull the trigger on the new house, we'll be ready to do it. So maybe they're not ready to move today, but they will renovate to stay for the next year or two, perhaps.
so they're not
Which is
just renovating it to maximize their profit when they do sell in a year or two, which they will maximize their profit, but they're also renovating so that they can really enjoy their house for the next year
For
or two.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like as a parent, if you were to buy a present for your children, but you kind of get to play with their present between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? You kind of get to have your
Yeah.
cake. I've never done that, of course not. Um, so let's talk about renovating your new home. Don't let an outdated room kill your dream. I'd love that line. Talk us through this.
Yeah, so I will tell you, it's a little bit of a different process. When I work with home sellers, typically I come in, my designer will do a really pretty design board. Here's what your new bathroom will look like, your new kitchen will look like, the new paint colors, etc. And they usually nod and say, I think that looks great, get to work. Or I think it looks great, but I don't like that faucet. Can you swap out that faucet? And of
Mm,
course, we'll make, little changes to that. But when I'm renovating for someone that is purchasing a new home and they know they're going to stay there for a significant period of time, 5, 10 years, or whatever it might be,
right.
the process is a little bit different. They do want to have input on those design choices. So I might give them a couple of different design boards to chew on and look at the different design choices, and they want to be more involved. It does matter what shade of white we paint those cabinets, if they're going to stay
Right.
there. So it's a little more collaborative. It's fun. It's a little more emotional, right? When they're
Yeah.
selling, they really don't care. They just want me to make it neutral so that the most possible buyers are attracted to the house. And it's really neat, renovating for somebody that wants to live there for a significant period of time.
Love that. It's very, very interesting. So let's talk about how renovation to sell actually works. We talked about the before after, what it does, the profit it can return, but let's get into the nitty gritty. So if I'm one of your clients that wants to do this renovation to sell, talk me through the process.
Yeah, so my job title should be, problem fixer, problem solution finder. I mean, like I started off with, like it's intimidating to talk about renovations because I think everybody's had a poor renovation experience or a contractor that did not show up. My job is to make sure that I've had people that have worked for me for years that are going to show up, they're going to show up on time, and the client's going to be happy with the quality of their work. So I'll meet with a homeowner. A lot of times a homeowner and a realtor together will walk through the property. They'll tell me, their ideas of renovation, what they would like to do. I might also make different suggestions, based on my experience. I'll go to the drawing board at that point, put together some pricing for them, and we'll discuss that together after a couple days. Um, a lot of times they'll tweak that a little bit, take something away, add something. Once we agree on a full scope, we'll get to work. Um, we'll put those design boards into action. You see bullet point 3 there. We can renovate today, pay later. We'll talk about that a little later. We do have financing for projects. But we get to work, and on average, we're in there for about 3 weeks, and average price point is typically around $30,000 or so.
Wow. Sounds good. And I would also maybe add to your job description, unlicensed therapist, because I can imagine the process gets very, very emotional, especially when it comes to a house you've lived in and want to sell, or a house that you want to buy and live in for a long time.
Yeah, both
Um,
ways, or friend too.
yeah,
I don't know, I become pretty attached to the families, especially the ones that are renovating to stay.
yep, yep. This is about the details mattering. So it seems like you've got a couple of different sections and areas that you focus on. So talk to us about these different, how you approach each home as it's unique, and then the ways that you're able to specify a client's needs to fit their budget.
Yeah, so every house is very different. And let's say, for example, we have a house that the homeowner is, 85 years old and they've lived there for 45 years and they haven't touched it. You could imagine every surface needs to be touched. And sometimes we do go in and we touch every surface, and it's a very large budget and we might be in there for a month. But oftentimes, I think you can hit the highlights of a home that really make a house sizzle. And those are typically your kitchen, your master bath, and your common areas. I don't think you have to touch every bathroom, every bedroom, every flooring surface. I don't think the basement always has to be completely updated. So it's making sure you're spending money in the right places, the right amount of money for the price point of the home that you're working on. So if I were working on a condo in Midtown, those design choices and that budget might be very different than a house up on Lake Lanier or a suburban house in Marietta. So the design choices are going to be very different. Price points are very different depending on the price point of the home and the potential buyer. And so it's a very strategic art type of discussion. I don't think it's an exact science, but making sure
Hmm,
that we get the biggest bang for the buck and that we're putting that money in the right places. And so these are
fascinating.
examples of what we do. When I said paint's my best friend, paint on walls, interior, exterior paint, stain on a deck to refresh a deck. You don't necessarily have to pull the deck down. Painting cabinets is probably the funnest thing that I do because it has the big wow effect and it's about
Right.
a 3-day project. And then as you alluded to, hardware, to
Yeah.
have a $10 cabinet pull makes a huge difference. So it's little things and making sure that you're not overspending and, putting money in places that you're not going to get it back.
That's awesome. I think the big summary there is minimal investments can oftentimes actually lead to a maximum return. Go ahead and print that on a t-shirt. So you alluded to timeline and how you like to be as efficient as possible. So talk us through how the numbers don't lie when it comes to these renovations you're doing.
Yeah, so after I tour the property, I typically come back within a day or two and give pricing. And it's a point of discussion where we can start talking about the exact scope. Am I hitting it right on the mark where they think that they need to be in terms of budget? Are we doing the right rooms? And then once I get to work, it's about 3 weeks on average. And that's for a pretty extensive project. If I'm just coming in doing a kitchen refresh or just one bathroom refresh, it might be 10 days.
Wow.
And then the projects vary. I've done projects as low as $5,000, and then I've done large full home remodels. So we can
Wow.
hit pretty much any budget. Timeline, I don't know that I've ever gone over 4 or 5 weeks for the really big stuff, but on average, we're 3 weeks or less, around $30,000 or less. And it should be a pain-free process.
That's great. Now this is always the fun part when you're watching HGTV shows is seeing the before and after at the end of each episode. So that we're getting to this part of our presentation. So let's watch this video.
Yeah, until I'll do a little commentary here in the background. So that is
I'll go back
a
just a little
design
bit.
board that you see. And I think we'll see more than one of those, but so
Here we go.
once
We'll just start it over.
yeah, so once I agree on a scope with the client, we'll supply a design board like this, and they say, yes, I love it. Get to work. And then you see some of the afters of this. So the before, the design board, and then the
Oh,
after. So
wow.
you can almost visualize, you see every one of the design choices that goes into that finished product so they can truly visualize.
This is
So
great.
you're right. This is the fun part, right? To see the before and after.
I also love how these examples you're showing not complete gut jobs, right? Like this isn't a burned out home. This is going from nice and good to exceptional and great.
Yeah, and there's nothing structural that changes. Sometimes I'll take out a tub. I don't know why people do not like
Right.
tubs anymore, but they'll convert those to freestanding walk-in shower. So I do a lot of that, but that's about the extent of the structural stuff most of the time. It's really keeping that same structure and just making it look really pretty.
But
Yeah.
how in the world are we going to be able to afford this? But before we talk about actually paying for all of this, Ashley, as somebody who's represented buyers, but is really specializing in listings, representing sellers, thinking about all the different nuggets of wisdom, the advice that Kelly has talked through, what are some pieces before we talk about actually affording and paying for these types of projects? What are some pieces that you wish your past clients would have believed in and followed, as well as future clients would kind of heed and take notice of based on what Kelly's been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little of a difficult question in a way because ultimately, when I'm selling somebody's home, it's their biggest asset, and of course, they want to maximize their profit, but then it's also on their timeline, and most of the time, they're living in the home
Yeah.
while it is selling. So I think the hardest part most of the time is to answer the question, where am I going to go while these
Mm,
renovations are happening? And what if my house doesn't sell for another month or 5 months or whatever? Now I'm sitting in a house that's doesn't feel like me. And so they're very what if questions. And so it's great to have data like this to be able to show examples of how changes can look and also kind of what the outcome can be for them.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, it's really up to the seller and showing them examples of a possibility.
yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
tell you, I
perfect.
rely very heavily on Ashley and realtors like Ashley that know their way around the market that they're selling in, because I always ask, "Are you working with a realtor?" when I'm called directly from a client, and then if they say no, I say, "Well, I would recommend that you reach out to a realtor because I would love to know that realtor's estimation of what they would list your house at today as is with no
Yeah.
renovations." And then if it had an updated kitchen, master bath, or whatever areas of concern were, that if we took care of those, what would they list that house at? And so I look at that difference and I know how much I need to spend on renovations, right? And so if they tell me that difference is $50,000, I'm not going to go in and spend $50,000 on renovations. I
Yeah,
might
yeah,
spend 15,000 so that they still get a return off of their investment. You certainly don't want a dollar swap. So I think it's super important to have that realtor expertise upfront and early. So we're spending good money, not bad money.
Um,
speaking of,
and I
go
think,
ahead, Ashley.
well, I was going to say this next section that we're about to talk about also, even if people can afford it, they're kind of like, why do I want to spend all this money up front? And so what we're about to talk about with a way that a seller or even a buyer could maybe afford this shows them that, really their money's not coming out of their pocket right away. It's going to, if all goes well, it'll be paid for at closing. And that also helps people swallow the, I think it sometimes is a money question in the back of their mind, even if they're not saying it out loud.
Right. That's a great point. All right, so let's talk about renovating today, paying for later.
Yeah, so I don't think that I have a hard time convincing a homeowner that they need to make renovations. I think a lot of times they know they've lived in their house for 20 years and they should do a few little things before they listed it to really maximize that sales price. But it's how am I going to fund that process? And
Yeah.
so I do have a partnership with FNBO, which is First National Bank of Omaha, where they will offer financing up to $80,000 for renovations. This could
Wow.
be for someone looking to sell, or it could even be for someone that just moved into a new home where they're going to be living in. It is a no payment or interest for 6 months. And then
Wow.
after that, that will convert to an installment loan. So for most of the people taking out this financing, they're typically sellers. And so I've got time to do the renovations. I'm in there
Yep.
for 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever that might be. And then they list the home and you've still got 6 months to sell that home without
Wow.
paying any type of payment. And so what typically happens is the houses sell faster, right? Because they're
Right.
beautiful. So they tend to sell pretty quick. And then they take the proceeds from closing and pay off that loan before it ever becomes due.
And if that's phenomenal. I mean, to me, this
It's
is
a
a
great
no-brainer.
product.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible. Um, so talking about selling the dream and renovation sells helps bring it to life. What a great way of synergizing, Ashley, selling the dream and helping that dream come to life. Wanted to thank you all for attending. And don't worry, I am going to plug my product here in just a second, Ashley. So here's what I would
Great.
say is if for some reason, whether it's a home that you're buying or a home that you want to stay in because you've owned it for a while and you're sick of looking at it, whatever that may be, if the renovation project exceeds that $80,000, there are some incredible products and programs that I could help you obtain financing for. One that hops to mind is something called a standalone second. Essentially, it's a second mortgage that you take against your property, just like your typical first lien notes, your first lien mortgages. This is going to be a 30-year fixed mortgage, so it's not going to have a fluctuating rate like a home equity line of credit. And it's essentially you'll receive an interest rate that's going to be comparable to an interest rate you'd receive in your first mortgage, and you can do that standalone second mortgage to finance projects that again are over $80,000. The other type of program or product is going to be for somebody who wants to either renovate the home that they're living in or renovate the home that they're buying. And this is called a reno loan or rehab loan. FHA offers products called a 203K, as well as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They offer their own product as well. So that's for a completely different webinar. I just wanted folks to know if you are wanting to contact Kelly or Ashley in order to start the renovation process on a home that you currently own or a home that you want to buy. And if you got that sneaking suspicion, or if after meeting with Kelly, that project's going to cost more than $80,000, do not give up. There are other financing options if the scope of your project exceeds $80,000. So with that being said, I'm Parker Couch. That's the wonderful Ashley Smith. We had an incredible guest with Kelly. Oh, of course, you're welcome. Don't worry, Ashley. We're going to answer questions here at the end. But I was reading a little blog about podcasting as well as webinars, and you should always end before you do your questions. That way you give people an opportunity to pause and opt out. So don't worry. I could feel Ashley being like, don't forget about questions. I've not forgotten. Please make sure you stay connected. Here's Ashley's info. Go ahead and do a screenshot if you're here, so you've got that saved and locked in. And then obviously, if you have loved what you have heard today, go ahead and scan that QR code where you can get more information, or you can go ahead and plug that in for Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much for not just being a guest on our first Friday webinar, but being our first guest who's physically been in the same space as either Ashley or myself. And that's saying something, because Ashley's dad has been a guest at least 2 times. So, I mean,
Sure.
that's pretty.
And he's my dad. You would
incredible.
think he'd be able to be in the same room as me.
Yep.
Well, I
No,
love it. This is fun. I mean, I've got passion for renovation. So to have me talk about what I love, so I appreciate the opportunity. It was fun.
yeah, of course. And I'm going to make sure that we give our legal disclaimer that the company is providing this training for us to use as a training tool only. These materials are not intended, nor should they be relied upon for any other purpose. So if you're a state auditing agency that's looking through this thing, just know we did do our due diligence and ended on a legal disclaimer. All right, Ashley, let's go ahead and talk about any questions that we have gotten from folks who are participating in our webinar. I know I saw one come through, but I didn't know, since I was doing the slide, thing. Did we have, what are some questions that you saw come through?
Yeah, most of the questions actually were answered. They were a lot from sellers, people who are selling and wondering about like timeline, wondering about how it might delay the selling process. But those were all answered during our webinar. But we do have one question from Jamie.
Okay.
She wants to do a master bath refresh, but it is a kind of broken up master bathroom situation. So it really would require like at least one wall to be moved, and maybe like a whole vanity to be moved. And she is wondering if you guys would do that kind of work.
Yeah, so we could, and we can talk about that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pull a permit. Let's look at it and see if that's a load-bearing wall. And moving a vanity from this spot to that spot is certainly still in the cosmetic realm.
Okay.
So yeah, let's talk about all of it. I mean, I've built out hallways, I've added decks, and we've done that kind of stuff. But 80% of my work is really coming in really quick, doing the cosmetic stuff, big bang for the buck quickly. But yeah, we'll talk about all of it.
Okay, great. Did you hear that, Jamie?
Yeah, there you go. 2 questions from my end. The first one is, Kelly, do you find yourself working with investors who specialize in fix and flips?
So we do. I work with a couple of large national investment companies that purchase houses. I don't know if I should say the name of those, but they're fairly large. One's regional here in the South, and one's national.
Okay.
And we do. So they know that we come in, they know that we make quick cosmetic updates, that we all have licensed and legal workers. They're all insured. And so yeah, I think there's something there to calling in the same contracting team, and you know what you get. And I understand how to work with investors because I've been a real estate investor for 23 years as well.
Awesome. And then second question is a little bit to what was related to what Jamie was asking, but for projects that are larger in scope, larger in budget, but mainly require pulling permits because we're doing structural work, will you work alongside other companies, or if you're brought on for the project, are you going to essentially take point on the entire thing, even the permitted work, the structural stuff, and just find subcontractors to do that permitted structural work?
Yeah, so it depends. It's whatever the client wants me to do, right? I mean, that's always the right answer. If they have a really great close neighbor that's doing all the permitted work, but they'd like for me to come in and do all the cosmetic stuff, the paint, the countertops, all of the, really pretty touches, I'm happy to stay in my lane. Or if they say, I just really like one person to manage this entire scope, could you do that too? We'll talk about that as well.
Awesome. All right, well, those are all the questions that we had. Kelly, thank you so much again for being an amazing guest. I know I learned a lot. Ashley, I know I'm in charge for webinar, our next month's webinar, which will be the first Friday in February. And Ashley, even though I haven't run this by you, there's been so many positive developments with interest rates ever since the Fed came out and said that they're almost certainly going to pause their rate hikes. I think that we are overdue for a webinar all about rate outlook and market outlook for 2024. So I'll be pitching that hard to you here pretty soon.
I think people would be interested in hearing about that. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the first Friday in February is Groundhog Day, and that sounds like a good way to tie
Yeah,
in
that's right.
a
It's like,
rate
should I be
situation to
peeking? Should I peek out? And are we going
exactly.
to have? Yeah, that's great. So there you go. Now we know what our slides are going to look like. Awesome. Well, Ashley, great talk seeing you as always. Kelly, wonderful to see you. Thanks for being a great guest. This has been First Friday Real Estate. We'll see y'all the first Friday of next month.